Her name was Elira, though no one had spoken it kindly in years. In the village of Brell Hollow, names were either prayers or warnings, and hers had become the latter. Nestled between snow-choked pines and jagged mountain cliffs, Brell Hollow looked like a picture torn from a storybook. But the silence wasn't peace, it was fear. Fear of things that couldn't be explained. Things that walked through flames. Things that survived blizzards. Things like Elira. She lived in the old hunter's cabin, alone. No chimney smoke. No candlelight. Only a flicker of movement at the window now and then. Just enough to remind the villagers she hadn't vanished like her mother. Just enough to keep the legends alive. They whispered that the curse began with her birth, on the night the stars vanished and the river froze mid-current. Her father vanished weeks later. Her mother was found years later, bones cradled in blackened ash. No one ever spoke of the fire in the northern woods that didn't spread. No one asked how a toddler had survived alone for days, wrapped in fur, not a single scratch on her skin. Instead, they left offerings at her doorstep, bread, coins, flowers wilted by frost. Not kindness, just fear wearing a polite face. Elira didn't hate them. She just didn't feel anything anymore. She watched them from her window, families laughing, lovers whispering in the square, children skating on the frozen lake. She watched as they thrived, untouched by whatever haunted her skin, her breath, her name. Until the outsider came. He wasn't like them. His coat was worn, stitched at the seams. His face carried stories he didn't speak of. His name was Kale, and he had no fear in his eyes. Kale had come seeking silence. A place to forget the war, the graves, the echo of a scream he couldn't silence. Brell Hollow had promised peace. Instead, he found her. He first saw Elira near the tree lean, her feet bare in the snow, holding a crow in her hands. She didn't flinch when it fluttered. She just watched him, eyes as still as the mountain lake. That night, the church bell rang without reason. No storm, no wedding, no death, only the sound of something beginning. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches something deep in you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning it happened, the sky was wrong. Too still, too pale, like it hadn't quite decided if it wanted to snow or burn. Kale was chopping wood behind the chapel when he heard it, distant and sharp. A child's scream, not of pain, but fear. He dropped the axe. By the time he reached the lake, a crowd had already formed. A little boy, no older than 7, was standing on the ice, trembling, pointing toward the trees. "She came from there," he cried. "She scared the deer. They ran right into the lake." 2 animals lay cracked beneath the surface, their antlers twisted in agony beneath frozen glass. She whispered something, and they just ran. All eyes turned to the tree line. Elira stepped out, barefoot again, skin pale as the snow, eyes calm, but her hands were shaking. Just slightly, just enough for Kale to notice. She cursed them, a woman hissed. "No," said the butcher, she called them. The priest crossed himself. "She's testing her power." Elira opened her mouth to speak, but the words never came. A stone hit her shoulder. Then another. She didn't flinch, didn't cry, just turned and walked away, slower than she should have. Kale couldn't move. Not from fear, not from doubt, but from something deeper. Something pulling at his chest like gravity. He'd come to Brell Hollow to disappear, but now, someone else was being erased right in front of him. That night, the village council gathered. Elira's name was on every tongue. She's growing stronger. She's bringing signs. She needs to be sent away before the snow turns red. Kale stood outside, listening through the walls. Then he did something reckless. He climbed the hill. He found her sitting by the frozen river, her breath fogging the air. "You're not afraid?" she asked. He shook his head. "I've seen war," he said. "What they do to girls like you." Elira didn't look at him, just whispered, "Then you know what's coming." From somewhere deep in the trees, a howl echoed. And this time, the sky finally made its choice. It began to burn. Father Dallin lit the last candle on the chapel's altar and pressed his trembling fingers to the wood. The villagers were restless, and fear was a poor companion to faith. Years ago, he had baptized Elira's mother. He remembered the warmth in her voice, the steadiness of her hands. He also remembered the day she stopped coming to church, after her husband vanished and the whispers began. He'd said nothing then, said nothing when she burned. Now the girl stood alone, and so did he. Outside, Mareth, the midwife, packed herbs in silence. She had delivered every child in Brel Hollow for 3 decades, yet never touched Alira. Not once. She told herself it was for the child's safety. But lately, something stirred in her gut. Regret, maybe, or guilt. Her daughter, Finna, didn't share her silence. Finna was 17 and furious. Not at Alira, but at the lies the village fed itself. She had watched from behind the bakery as they threw stones. She had felt sick, ashamed. That night, she crept from her home and left a scarf on Alira's doorstep, hand-woven, embroidered with frost blue thread. No note, no name, just warmth. In the tavern, whispers flew between mugs of mead. She controls animals now. No, Kale's protecting her. That man's hiding something. He's been to war. Maybe he brought the curse back with him. Roran, the blacksmith, leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. He didn't speak much, but he watched everything. He'd seen what war did to men. Kale had the same look in his eyes, the one soldiers wore when they'd buried too many names. Roran didn't believe in curses, but he did believe in fire. And fire, he knew, never burned without reason. Meanwhile, in the forest, something else was stirring. An old hunter named Brig, long thought mad, had returned. Scarred, eyes white from snow blindness, he wandered into the village muttering about a shape in the woods. "It's not her," he said, trembling. "It's what's watching her." They laughed at him, of course, but Kale didn't. He found Brig near the well the next day and asked, "What did you see?" Brig's voice was low, ragged. "Not a beast, not a man. It wears the forest, wears the wind, and it's waiting for her." "For Alira?" "No," Brig said. "Through her." The next evening, Finna brought a loaf of bread to Alira's cabin. She didn't speak, just left it on the step. Inside, Alira sat in silence, scarf in her hands. She didn't know who left it. But for the first time in years, something flickered in her chest. A tether. Not safety, but the beginning of something fragile. Connection. The snowstorm came without warning. One moment the sky was clear, stars blinking through the dark like frozen candles. And the next, the wind screamed as if the mountain itself had opened its lungs. The villagers locked their doors. But Alira was already outside. She stood at the edge of the forest, her scarf whipping around her neck. Kale just a few steps behind. The trees were bending, not from the storm, but from something moving through them. Kale grabbed her wrist. "What is it?" She didn't answer, because something inside her had shifted. Not fear, not pain, but knowing. "I think it's here for me." Then, crack. From the trees emerged a creature like smoke and teeth. Not fully formed. Not beast. Not man. A thing that flickered between shapes, stitched together by shadow. The villagers saw it too. A few had followed Kale, Roran, Finna, and Father Dallin among them, and now stood frozen at the sight of the thing that haunted their nightmares. Roran raised an axe. "Back!" The creature hissed. Not at him, but at Alira. And then it spoke. Not in words. In memory. Each person heard something different. Kale heard the battlefield, the final breath of a dying friend. Finna heard her mother's sobs the night her father vanished. Father Dallin heard the cries of the woman he had failed to protect, Alira's mother. And Alira? She heard her own voice. As a child. Laughing. Then crying. Then screaming. The truth struck her like a knife. This thing wasn't just haunting the forest. It had grown with her. Fed from her. And now, it was part of her. She fell to her knees, gasping, as frost spread under her hands. Kale pulled her up, but her eyes were wide and hollow. "I thought they were wrong about me," she whispered. But maybe they weren't. The villagers didn't wait for more. Father Dallin stepped forward, face pale. "She brought it. We all saw." "She is it," someone whispered from the back. The crowd turned. Kale stood between them and Alira, arms wide. "You don't understand. This isn't her fault. She needs to be gone," someone yelled. "Banish her." Roran didn't speak, but he didn't lower his axe either. Kale looked at Alira. "We leave. Tonight. Now. But Alira didn't move. I don't know if I can leave, she said, barely audible. The wind howled louder, as if answering her. This was the moment everything shifted. Not because the villagers turned on her. Not because Kale tried to save her. But because for the first time in her life, Alira didn't know if she wanted to be saved. The next morning, the storm had passed, but the village had changed. So had Alira. She sat alone by the river's edge, her reflection fractured by thin layers of ice. She no longer recognized the girl staring back. There was something ancient in her eyes now, something both mournful and sharp, like the memory of a blade. Kale approached quietly, his coat wrapped tightly against the cold. He didn't speak right away. He knew better. Words couldn't fix what had been cracked open the night before. "They'll never trust me again," she said, barely above a whisper. "They never trusted you to begin with," he replied. "But that doesn't make them right." Alira looked at him, not with the fear or gratitude she once held, but with something else. Doubt. "Why are you still here?" she asked. Kale knelt beside her. "Because when I look at you, I don't see a curse. I see someone fighting to stay human in a world that keeps trying to make her a monster." For the first time, her lip trembled. Not from cold. From something fragile. Something dangerous. Hope. Back in the village, things were changing too, but not for the better. Finna sat in her mother's kitchen, staring at the burn marks on her arms. The creature's presence had left scars, not physical, but spiritual. It had scraped something from inside her, a memory she hadn't known she still carried. The night her father walked into the woods and never returned. She remembered his voice, the way it cracked when he said her name. "I think it took him," she told Mareth. Her mother didn't answer, just stirred the stew. Roran was sharpening blades in his forge, his face hard. He didn't believe in demons, but he did believe in protection. And whatever Alira was, whoever she was becoming, it made people afraid. And fear was a spark that set entire towns aflame. Meanwhile, Father Dallin sat before the altar, clutching his rosary with trembling hands. He had spent years preaching mercy, but now, even he felt unsure. "If she is part of it," he whispered to no one. "What does that make us?" The ones who watched. The ones who named her curse before she even spoke. In the forest, the creature had vanished, but the trees still bent when Alira passed. Animals followed her now, not out of fear, but something deeper. Recognition. As if she was no longer a stranger to this world, but part of its strange design. Alira began to notice things. She could hear the crackling of frost before it formed. She could feel the heartbeat of birds through the wind. But with this power came new emotion, not rage, not vengeance. Guilt. She didn't ask for any of this. But that didn't change what was true. Her presence shifted the world around her. Kale called it a miracle. Others called it an omen. One night, she stood outside Kale's cabin. "I'm changing," she said. "I know. And I don't know if I'll be safe to be around." He looked at her, really looked. At the sorrow that lived just beneath her skin. At the strength growing beside it. "You don't need to be safe," he said. "You just need to be you." Alira stepped forward, pressing her forehead to his. "I don't want to hurt anyone," she whispered. "Then don't," he replied. "But if you must burn, let it be for something that matters." Behind them, the wind stirred again. Not in warning, but in recognition. The world knew her now, and it was watching. The letter arrived at dawn. Kale found it wedged under the door of the cabin, wrapped in dark cloth and sealed with wax that bled like dried blood. No name, no sender, just one line scrawled in elegant, spidery handwriting. "She is not the first." He read it again, and with every repetition, a chill spread deeper in his bones. When he showed it to Alira, her hands shook. "What does it mean?" "I don't know," Kale said, "but I think someone does." They rode at first light. The path was steep, leading into the Elder Hills, where few dared go, and fewer returned unchanged. There, hidden among the ruins of a once sacred monastery, lived an old scribe named Ilson. He had been a historian before the world grew tired of remembering. Now he was just a voice in the dark. He was waiting for them. "I wondered when someone would come for the truth," he said, without looking up. Alira stepped forward. "Do you know what I am?" Ilson's eyes were cataract pale, but sharp. You are Echoborn. Silence. Kale glanced at Alira, confused. Echoborn, he asked. Ilsa nodded. Children of the Rift. Born not of human will, but of ancient imbalance. When pain echoes loud enough, long enough, the world remembers. It listens, and sometimes it answers. Alira sat down slowly. The air knocked from her chest. I wasn't cursed by the village, she whispered. No, Ilsen said gently. You were created by it. Her mother's death, the fire, the whispers, the rejection, the prayers to be rid of her. All of it fuel. The creature in the forest wasn't separate from her. It was her, a fractured version, a shadow, an echo of the pain that birthed her soul. Kale stepped forward, his voice tight. Then can she be unmade? No, Ilsen said simply. But she can choose what she becomes. Alira closed her eyes. Images flashed behind her lids. Of her childhood, of being called a bad omen, of the screams the night the frost first appeared in her cradle. She had always thought she was born into misfortune, but now she knew the truth. She was the misfortune, and yet, Kale was still here, still standing beside her. I'm not human, she said, tears cutting down her cheeks. You're more, Kale answered. She turned to him, fragile and furious and reborn. I wasn't meant to survive, she whispered. But you did, he replied. And that means something. She looked down at her hands, and for the first time, she didn't feel fear. She felt power, not the wild, destructive kind that came with fire and frost, but the quiet kind, the kind that chooses, the kind that reclaims. In that moment, the truth reshaped everything. She had not been cursed by others. She had been created by their cruelty. But what she became next, that was hers to decide. Alira didn't return to the village. She couldn't. Not yet. She stood at the edge of a frozen lake, watching her reflection ripple beneath a sheet of wind-kissed ice. It no longer frightened her, but it didn't comfort her either. She now understood what she was, but understanding didn't make it easier. I was made from grief, she whispered. Kale stood beside her, silent. Not comforting, not fixing, just there. But the village had no such stillness. Fenna was the first to feel it, that invisible shift in the air, the storm in the trees, the way the birds fell silent when Alira's name was spoken. She stood outside the chapel, her hands gripping the edges of her coat, her heart pounding with a truth she didn't want. We did this, she murmured. We made her. Her brother, Jaren, scoffed. She's still dangerous. She's hurt, Fenna snapped. There's a difference. But Jaren wasn't listening. Neither were most. Father Dallin collapsed in front of the altar. His prayer book lay open on the floor, unread. I preached mercy to a child we damned, he whispered into the stone. Guilt clung to his throat like smoke. What was faith if it didn't protect the innocent? What was salvation if it only came after suffering? In his forge, Roran slammed steel against anvil, his rhythm angry, desperate. She's not a girl anymore, he muttered. She's something else. His daughter stood in the doorway. Something else, she repeated. Or something we made. He didn't answer, because he didn't know. And then there was Marath, Alira's aunt, who had once held her as a baby, convinced the chill in her skin meant she'd never be warm enough to survive. Now she stood in the woods alone, hands clasped tight. I should have loved you harder, she whispered to the trees. Before the world turned you into something it feared. Back by the lake, Alira sat alone. I didn't ask to be this, she said softly. Kale looked at her, eyes tender. No one ever asks to carry the burden of others. She turned to him, searching. Then why do I still want to save them? Kale's voice cracked. Because you're the miracle they never deserved. Alira woke before the sun rose. For the first time in weeks, her dreams hadn't been haunted by screaming winds or burning wood. Instead, they were still, cold, clear, like the moment right before snowfall. She stepped outside, her bare feet brushing the frostbitten grass, and exhaled. She was no longer hiding from what she was. Now, she was learning how to be it. Kale stood by the horses, tightening the reins, eyes still heavy with yesterday's weight. You slept, he noted softly. Elira nodded. And I decided. He turned to her. No more running, she said. No more waiting for them to change. I'm going back, not to ask for forgiveness, not to prove anything, but to protect what's still worth saving. Kale blinked. They tried to burn your name from memory. I know, she said, voice calm. But they're not the only ones who live there. Fenna, Mareth, the children. I won't be what they fear, but I won't vanish either. Kale looked at her for a long time. Then slowly, he nodded. Then we go together. But this time, they didn't ride straight into the village. They stopped at the Whispering Groves, where the boundary between the seen and unseen was thin. Elira placed her hands on the ancient trees and breathed deeply. I want to understand it all, she whispered. Not just what I am, but what I can do. The echo stirred, not to consume, but to teach. Visions flickered through her mind, of how her presence disrupted balance. Yes, but also how it could heal it. With focus, with intention, she could pull pain out of the land, not just mirror it back. What had once been reflex could now become choice. Control, not suppression, not denial, but mastery. When she opened her eyes again, Kale was staring. What did you see? He asked. She turned toward him, wind lifting her hair like a crown. Hope, she said. Back at the cabin, Elira sketched symbols into the dirt, marks of the old ways, not taught, but remembered. Kale watched her move with quiet precision, like she was putting her past in order one line at a time. You're building something, he said. She nodded. Not a weapon, a boundary, a ward. To protect them? To protect everyone. If I lose myself again, if something breaks, it won't spread. I want to carry this power, not let it carry me. Kale knelt beside her. And if they still hate you? I'm not doing it for their love, Elira said. I'm doing it because I can. And that has to be enough. Her voice didn't tremble. Her hands didn't shake. She no longer needed someone to tell her she was a miracle. She had become one. The ward was nearly complete. Elira's markings pulsed with soft blue light, ancient, raw, and alive. The forest trembled with it. Her body ached. Her spirit stretched thin, but her focus held. Kale stood at the edge of the grove, watching her with a quiet mix of awe and dread. We're almost there, he said. But they weren't alone. A voice shattered the stillness. Step away from her. Jaren. He and a group of villagers emerged from the trees, torches in hand, eyes wild with fear. Behind them, Fenna, face pale, lips pressed in regret. You don't understand, Kale shouted, moving in front of Elira. She's saving us, saving you. She's building a trap, Jaren hissed. To finish what she started. To bury us with our own guilt. That's not what this is. Elira cried, stepping forward. But they didn't hear her. They never had. Jaren raised his crossbow and pointed it not at Elira, but at Kale. This ends now. No, she screamed, throwing up her hands as energy surged. Too late. The arrow flew. Kale collapsed. Everything froze. The world. Her breath. Her blood. She ran to him, cradling his head, his blood soaking into her palms like ink. I was supposed to protect you, she whispered, trembling. You did, he rasped. You made me believe again. And then he was still. The echo inside her roared awake, grief and fury blazing through her like wildfire. The villagers staggered back, but Elira didn't strike. She stood, tears blazing on her cheeks, and walked toward them. They flinched, but she dropped to her knees, placed her blood-stained hand on the ground, and whispered one word. Peace. Light surged from her fingers, soft, not sharp. Warmth, not fire. The ward activated, not to destroy, but to contain her grief, her power, her pain. And with it, she locked away part of herself. Her final act of love, her final gift. Kale was gone, and Elira would never be the same. But now, the world would be. The village was quiet now. The once bustling streets were empty. The market silent. The air hung heavy with the weight of what was coming. Every step Elira took felt like it echoed through the bones of the earth itself. She had no time to mourn. Kale's death was still too raw, too fresh, but she pushed it aside. The ward she had set up could only hold for so long. The power inside her, her echo, was shifting again. The village, the people she had once tried so desperately to save, were now caught in the storm of her wrath, her sorrow. The markings on her hands glowed faintly, like the pulse of a heartbeat. She could feel the energy building, swirling in her chest, threatening to spill over. I have to finish this. She reached the center of the village, the place where it had all started. The square was empty, save for the statue of the old god who once protected the people. It felt like a betrayal now, a monument to a god who had let them fall into this madness. Finna arrived first, her face drawn tight with guilt and fear. Elira, please, stop. I can't, Elira said, her voice hoarse. They've made their choice, and I can't undo it. Finna's eyes welled with tears. I'm sorry, Elira. I didn't mean for any of this. I know, Elira whispered, her hands trembling. But it doesn't matter anymore. Behind them, Jaren and the rest of the villagers gathered, weapons in hand, their faces a mix of defiance and terror. They were ready for this fight. They had no choice. Their minds had been poisoned by fear, by the thought that Elira was a curse they couldn't contain. They will come for me, Elira said, turning to face the approaching darkness. Her breath was shallow, her heart beating fast. And when they do, I'll be ready. A shift in the wind carried a dark promise. From the hills beyond, the distant sound of drums echoed, the war drums of those who would come for her, those who had once revered her, who now sought to destroy what she had become. We'll be waiting, Jaren called, his voice shaking. Elira didn't respond. She couldn't. The final confrontation was no longer just about survival. It was about something far deeper, something that had to be finished. The cycle of fear and violence had to end, one way or another. Finna stepped closer, a hesitant plea in her eyes. Elira, you don't have to do this. You can walk away. We can rebuild. Elira turned to her, her expression hardening. Rebuilding requires trust. You lost mine when you chose fear over truth. Finna's face fell, but she didn't argue. The truth was undeniable. The villagers had already decided they'd rather fight than understand. I don't want this fight, Elira said softly, almost to herself. But I won't let them destroy everything, either. With one last look at Finna, Elira closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The power surged inside her, pulsing with the promise of change. She could feel it gathering, her mind focused, her heart steeled. This is it. The drums grew louder. Her time had come. The air was thick with the tension of the final moments. The war drums echoed in the distance, each beat a reminder that time was running out. Elira stood alone in the village square, her hands pulsing with power, heart heavy with loss. Kale's face flashed in her mind, but she quickly silenced it. She had no room for grief now. The battle was already here. The villagers stood in a loose circle around her, Jaren at the forefront, his eyes burning with fury. Behind him, the rest of the town watched, weapons gripped tight, faces set in grim determination. They had come, not just to defeat her, but to end what they saw as the curse that had haunted them all. Elira's breath came in shallow bursts. She knew what they thought of her, how they'd twisted the story of her powers. But today, everything changed. She would no longer let fear dictate the path. She would show them the truth. Not just for them, but for herself. You came for me. Elira's voice broke the silence, steady but full of emotion. But I never came for you. Jaren's voice cracked through the air. You'll destroy us all if you don't stop. You've poisoned the land with your curse. My curse. Elira spat, her eyes blazing. My curse is nothing compared to the poison you've fed yourselves. Fear, hatred, lies. He stepped forward, his crossbow raised, the tip aimed at her heart. You've left me no choice, Elira. It's you or all of us. We don't have a choice anymore. Then I'm sorry, she whispered, as a wave of raw power surged from her hands. The ground beneath their feet rumbled. The ward Elira had placed around the village began to crackle with life, its faint blue light now a brilliant, burning force. It surged toward Jaren, who staggered back, but the power wasn't meant to strike him. It was meant to break the barrier between them and the world outside. Jaren's eyes widened. You want to leave us to face it all alone? Elira's eyes softened. No, I want to free you. With a final, sweeping motion, Elira released the power from deep within her. Her grief, her rage, her love, all the emotions she had locked away now poured into the world. But this wasn't destruction. This was a purging of all the hatred, all the fear that had tainted their souls. The sky above them cracked open in a moment of sheer brilliance, and the village square was filled with the light of 1,000 falling stars. Time seemed to stop. Elira was no longer in control, the echo was. Jaren, his heart heavy with guilt, stared in disbelief. You can't just erase it all. You can't fix it if you keep running from it. Elira replied, her voice steady, as the storm raged around them. The curse isn't what I am. It's what you let fear turn you into. Fenna emerged from the crowd, pushing through the frightened villagers. Her face was pale, but her eyes were resolute. Elira, stop. You're killing them. No, Elira said, her hands glowing brighter. I'm freeing them. Fenna's voice shook. No one can save themselves from their past. Not like this. The power was unbearable now, every fiber of Elira's being straining to contain it. And then, in a moment of clarity, she realized it wasn't just about fighting or saving anyone. It was about breaking the cycle, letting them choose, letting them see. I won't do it for you, Elira said softly, but I will give you the chance. With one last push, Elira released the final surge of her power into the earth beneath them, a wave that pulsed outward like a shockwave, rattling the bones of the village. The echo faded, and silence followed. Jaren fell to his knees, the crossbow slipping from his hand as he gazed into the empty space where Elira had stood. Her power was gone, but the villagers, those who were left, stood in stunned silence, their eyes wide, their breath shallow. Elira turned toward Fenna, her expression unreadable. The choice is yours now. Fenna opened her mouth to speak, but words failed her. The world had shifted. Everything had changed, and they would have to live with the consequences. But Elira didn't wait for their decision. She turned, walking away from the village, her footsteps soft but sure. She had freed them from the chains they had forged. Now, it was time to find herself. The village was silent. The air that had once crackled with power now felt empty, as if the earth itself had exhaled a long, heavy breath. Elira walked away, her back straight, each step heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The people she had tried so desperately to save, those who had feared her, hated her, and even loved her, were left behind. She had given them the power to choose their own fate, to reclaim what they had lost. But the cost had been her own. Her echo was gone. The power that had coursed through her veins, the very thing that had set her apart, had faded into nothingness. She was no longer what they feared. She was no longer what they needed. Her body felt lighter with each step, but her heart carried the weight of all that was unsaid. Kale's face haunted her, his absence more real now than ever. She hadn't been able to save him. In the end, she hadn't been able to save herself from the pain either. But she had freed them. The village behind her would rebuild, or it would crumble. She couldn't decide that for them. It was no longer her fight. It wasn't her war to win or lose. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the colors of the sky shifting to shades of crimson and gold, a strange peace settled within her. She stopped at the edge of the forest, the trees standing like silent sentinels, waiting for her to make a choice. She could stay. She could return to the village, offer what little healing was left in her, and help them piece together the broken fragments of their lives. But she knew, deep down, that her place was no longer there. The world beyond these borders still called to her. And though she had lost so much, she had gained something in return: freedom. A single tear slipped down her cheek, not from sorrow, but from the weight of everything that had been left behind. She had no answers, no promises, only the quiet certainty that she would find her way, as she always had. And then, just as the last light of day disappeared beyond the horizon, a faint voice called out to her from the shadows. Elira. She turned. Fenna stood at the edge of the village, watching her with a mixture of sorrow and awe. You've made your choice, Fenna said, her voice carrying on the evening wind. But so have I. Elira's gaze softened. What will you do? Fenna hesitated, the distance between them heavy with unsaid words. Then, quietly, she spoke. Maybe we all need to find our own way. But I'm not running anymore. Elira nodded slowly. It was enough. Without another word, she turned back toward the forest, the only path that remained open to her. The echo of her power was gone, but the strength to walk forward, alone or not, would carry her through. The last light of the sun disappeared. The night was quiet, save for the whisper of the wind. And in that silence, Elira took her first step into the unknown.